Welcome everyone to Championship Formula, and today I'm your co-host Casey
with Thomas,
my other co-host, and this is our new podcast, I guess.
The Championship.
This is what Championship Formula was always meant to be, but we've always had scheduling conflictions and things like that. So
that, and I'm just lame, it happens.
It happens, but we're all here today. So our topic, AFC North football.
The troublesome AFC North.
The troublesome AFC North. I have a pretty hot take. I think every team in the AFC North can have a legitimate chance to compete in the playoffs. But I know a lot of people are down on the Bengals. This team is not really that far away from a playoff contention, especially with the 7th seed being anywhere between like 7-9, 8-8. I think this team definitely could get it. But to explain myself, let's first talk about the Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens won the division last year. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They ran through the league.
They stomped
everyone. And the only really foreseeable issue I see with this team is the potential loss in Marshall Yanda. He did retire this offseason. The talent on this team, the coaching, all the additions that they made in the draft and free agency, it's just a no-brainer that this team is probably going to win the division or possibly even win the AFC. So
you see, my thing is, though, so the Panthers a few years ago, how they had the year when they went to the Super Bowl and played the Broncos.
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, they had Cam Newton and Greg Olsen, and that was like pretty much a lot of their offense. And not that the Ravens team is the exact same way, but I see a lot of that in the Ravens team where it's like, let's get the ball to our tight ends. Yeah, they have really good tight ends and they have a good backfield, but like outside of Hollywood Brown, I don't like their receivers. At least of last year, it wasn't really like great for him. I think.
Yeah, they are definitely putting a lot on Lamar Jackson's shoulders, and it's going to be tough for him. I think this is his second playoff loss in a row, and quite honestly a horrible fashion in my opinion.
Awful.
I even tweeted during that game, and I said, this guy's got some playoff woes, and he's only played 2 games. I can just see it. He might shock me next season.
You can see the Andy Dalton coming.
I can see the next Andy Dalton coming, and I know I will get crucified by all the Ravens fans for saying that. But he just looks like he doesn't have the confidence during those games.
Yeah,
I went back and watched them, and he just, right off the gate, he throws an interception, and it went downhill from there. Yes, the Titans were hot, but so were the Ravens. They both have pretty much similar play styles. They're smash mouth football. That game just got out of hand way too quickly. So,
I mean, when your offense is as good as the Ravens were last year, and then you go into that game and you just don't perform how everyone thinks or knows you should, especially with the Titans having just like a running back and a quarterback that, does he deserve as much money as he's getting? I don't know. But like when a lot of your offense is just your running back and they're just playing smash mouth football running at you, your offense should easily be able to keep up with that with having those tight ends and like the running backs that can catch balls out of the backfield and Lamar Jackson being able to run all over everyone and put those random pirouette spin moves on people like crazy. I just don't understand how their offense didn't perform any better than they did. Because even if Lamar Jackson himself didn't perform well, you'd expect some guys to pick it up somewhere, pick up something. But I guess just Lamar Jackson not performing just kind of kills their whole vibe.
I'm going to definitely do a review sometime on that game because I honestly believe in some sort of, when you start off in the game of football and you just make a critical error, teams usually fall apart. Only the good teams with great leaders like Patrick Mahomes
and the Chiefs
can come back from a deficit. Lamar, he's interesting to me because I think he's definitely got it. He could easily turn things around in the playoffs and in his playoff woes. I saw it watching the Steelers game in week 5, which I'm going to talk about later, but he came back from that game and he won in overtime. Now, did he do it himself? No, it was a lot on his defense, but he was leading this team in the right direction. And that is honestly what set the dominoes for them to just start rolling every team in the NFL. Steelers are a big hurdle.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to talk about them a lot later on.
My
But for now,
my question real quick. On their defense, like I don't even watching their games last year, their defense I thought was like not really as even remotely close to as good as their offense was. Their defense just kind of made it to where they could keep them in a game if their offense was like struggling pretty hard. If their offense continued to struggle like through the entire game, like an increased period of time, I felt like their offense at that point it kind of looked like the old Saints, how they would score like 40 points a game and their defense had to keep the other team at 39 points, kind of thing, where their defense just kind of was lackluster and kind of trying to keep up with another team, but then their offense had to just outplay everyone. And I think that kind of contributed to their playoff loss a little bit.
yeah, I think it was more just they were a very aggressive defensive team. They were allowed to play aggressive.
Yeah.
Ravens offense just consistently put them ahead of other teams early on. And a lot of that was attributed to early turnovers for that defense, early like sacks and other things like that. And that probably hurt them in the long run because the Titans didn't make mistakes. They just played smash mouth football, forced it down their throats. And when they really, really needed that turnover that the defense would give them every other game, they just couldn't get it. They weren't able to produce that.
Yeah, I think the Titans did like the right thing in that game just by not putting it in the air, because I feel like that's a lot of their defense. They like bat balls and like they're pretty good like coverage defense when it comes to running. I don't think they really have like that Ray Lewis type to just sure up the middle. Like I think that's kind of like missing in a lot of teams in the NFL right now. Is just like that sure linebacker that can just absolutely destroy. Which maybe Patrick Queen out of LSU maybe
Solve some of those issues.
solve some of that a little bit, or
Yeah,
yeah.
he is a bit smaller, but I think he's versatile enough to be able to help in the run game. I do agree with you. They were more set up for passing, but a lot of that stems from, the other big dog in the AFC being the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to stop or at least slow down Mahomes, whether that's with turnovers, which we did see that in the Super Bowl, that they were very close to losing that game, had a couple turnovers here and there, but, Patrick Mahomes kind of clutched that one up for him.
Did what he does.
Yeah, did what he does.
I'm thinking maybe like you said, they have the main coverage kind of thing down. If they can just get even just one guy like Patrick Queen, if they can get him in there and kind of get him, like you said, he's versatile, so maybe he can just shore up a little bit of like the tackles on the inside. Because really, I think that's literally the only like rough part of their game. It's just that running. They just need to shut that down. And again, another thing that probably contributes to that is the fact that they get up by a bunch of points early. If they just get one stop, their offense just scores and scores and scores. So they get up early, so they never really have to stop the run. So I think a lot of their guys don't really focus on the run game necessarily, how they attack the run game. They're more of just rushers, like actually just rushing the quarterback, trying to get there kind of thing. So I don't think they really focus on running game a whole lot. So
Yeah, and on top of all that, they did pick up Calais Campbell for literally pennies.
for
I couldn't
absolutely
believe that.
nothing.
And I think that defense is probably going to be better next season. The only reason why I don't have them just straight up winning the AFC is because one of the Kansas City Chiefs, and two, a lot of those runs stem from momentum.
Yeah.
And that Steelers game in week 5, I could just see it after that they were just steamrolling teams. Steelers are the big dogs in the AFC North, even till this day, I think. When a team in the AFC North beats the Steelers, they get the confidence to go and say, we can beat any of these teams.
You see, I'm not gonna lie. Don't really like the Steelers, but I think they got like this juju thing about them. Like they got an aura around them, because when you go to play the Steelers, you know you're gonna have a game. Like regardless of if the Steelers are, let's say it's week 7 and they're 0-6, the Steelers are still going to come to play you. Like,
Yeah,
it's not just a cakewalk. It never is just a cakewalk with the Steelers, ever.
agreed. And that brings us to the other teams in the AFC North. I'm going to start with the Browns. We're going to save the Steelers and the Bengals for last.
The good old
Because the
Browns.
Browns are they're a team that I feel like could easily go either way, but they made all the right moves in the offseason this year. And really, this team is just dependent on now Baker Mayfield and their new head coach, Stefanski.
You see, me and you, we've talked about this a little bit before, but we have kind of differing opinions on the Browns because I think the Browns have like we both agree that the Browns have the chance to be good, but I think they're one of their main problems is that their guys you can bring in all the like superstars you want, but if they don't mold well together, and I know Landry and OBJ played together at LSU, but that was years ago, and neither of them were like they were good receivers, like they were really good receivers, but they weren't like stardom like they are now, kind of thing. Like everyone knows them, which kind of puts it to where they want to be the guy, basically. And I think that Baker a lot of the time tries to appease OBJ, and you can't do that. You can't just I'm going to throw to OBJ because that just then gets it to where you'll have like a Richard Sherman or like one of those better corners in the league just sitting there covering OBJ, and then Landry. They have their second guy on him. Landry's really good, like a really good receiver. Like he could be a number one easily on any other team. But since they have OBJ there, it's kind of like a conflicting kind of back when the Bengals had Terrell Owens and Ocho Cinco kind of thing, where they both kind of want to be that guy. And I think Landry is a little more okay with being the second guy than obviously T.O. was or anything. But I still think it's kind of the point where Baker's got to kind of juggle both of those egos kind of thing. And then they have guys in the backfield that are like really good backs, and it's like, who do you get the ball to more? Like, who gets more touches this day? And I think when teams win, like with the Patriots for the past couple of years, with them having all these star players, if you want to call them, with Gronk and Tom Brady and all them, I think those guys learned what it meant to like actually play as a team and what it meant to not be selfish. And I think that's why they've won so many like championships. Yeah, you can have all the skill in the world, but if you don't use that skill together in a mold kind of way, then nothing will happen with it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of stability will come with Stefanski being the head coach there. You can kind of see that he's kind of the perfect coach for this job.
Yep.
You know, coming from the Vikings offensive coordinator position, he had Dalvin Cook. He had 2-star receivers in Thielen and Stephon Diggs.
Yep.
And a quarterback that was kind of unknown. And he's basically coming into the same situation, possibly with even better talent. A big thing, too, they kind of did plug in some holes on the defense. A lot of people don't give them credit on defense, but they were not that bad last year, especially with Myles Garrett. Without Myles Garrett,
Myles Garrett.
Mr.
Swings helmets.
Yeah, swings helmets. he definitely needs to be there for them to be good. But now that he's coming back, I think this team can definitely make a complete 180 from 6-10 to 10-6. I looked at their schedule, and I think they probably have one of the easiest out of all the AFC North teams.
Yep,
and really just comes down to if they can beat the Ravens, if they can beat the Steelers, which they split both teams last year.
Yeah.
So I think they can easily turn their fortunes around this season.
I think the only other thing they were really like missing last year, like you kind of pointed to, was with Freddie Kitchens or whatever. He wasn't really a leader as a coach. He was more of like kind of how I attribute, and we'll talk about this later, Zach Taylor. He's less of a leader, more of a kind of players guy. Kind of like he wants to get along with the players and make sure they got what they need to be good. And then if that's the case, like you can have coaches like that and they'll work, but you have to have those veterans on the team that know exactly what to do and like can tell everyone what to do. And you're kind of missing that with like OBJ. Yeah, he's kind of a veteran guy, but he hasn't been around all these guys for all that long. And then Landry, he's been there, but it's kind of when it comes to like having leaders on the team, it's kind of hard for your receiver to be like the main guy because it's more of like having a running back or a quarterback or an offensive lineman being your head veteran kind of guy because they're all there together always kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And your receivers obviously are like wide out, spread out. So when it comes down to actually making calls during the play or anything like that, or even like locker room issues, when you think of receivers, you're usually thinking of like diva kind of guys that are just like, oh, it's all about me. Whereas like your running backs or your quarterbacks, they're kind of like, let's keep this together, kind of keep the show running. And one other thing I kind of want to talk about, and I know you said you wanted to talk about it, them trying to bring in Clowney, and I don't know how well that's going to work out for him because I think Clowney just wants to go to somewhere with a championship possibility.
Yeah,
And it's not about the money right now; it's just about the championship winning.
and definitely at the time of this recording, he did turn them down, but it doesn't mean that they're gonna still front him another contract for even more money. If they get him, then I think 100% they have a legitimate chance of sweeping the AFC North. But, the thing is, like you said, he doesn't want to go to a team that isn't ready for a championship now. That's why he's kind of stuck where he's at right now. He doesn't want to take a massive pay cut for multiple years. He just wants either a 1-year deal for less money so he can prove that he's worth more money, which he already technically did.
Yep.
Or he wants a massive contract for multi years, and he's probably not going to get that. A lot of the teams right now have set their roster. A lot of the good teams already have those positions filled. They don't need to add Clowney to be better. I kind of see Clowney working really well with the Browns. I think if he goes there, they actually have a legitimate shot at contention for the AFC North and for the AFC in general. We'll see. I would love to know what the numbers were.
Yeah.
Because if I knew that, then I would know for sure. But, all it is just talk currently.
Yeah.
So
a little bit of my question for it, like if Clowney did go to the Browns, how do you think they would actually use him? Like, because technically he's listed as like a right outside linebacker, but we all know that right outside linebackers are really just edge rushers these days. They'll bring him in for edge rushing and all this, that, and the other. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure they play a 4-3, and they would probably just use him as an edge rusher. I don't think they would make him stand up.
That'd be real scary with him and Myles Garrett out there. If they actually got that and then like shirt up everything else, make sure everybody else is where they need to be. And like you said, their defense is like a legit defense. Like they have pieces and they can win games. But if you get Clowney in there, honestly, I think whoever Clowney goes to, regardless, is just picked up like a major threat, and their defense just goes to that next level kind of thing. Which I don't know if teams in the NFL right now see that, but because like a lot of them are like, well, we don't really need him to be great. Which yeah, you're probably right. You don't need him to be great, but if you have him on there, that's just that extra like
Oomph.
that extra oomph, that next push you need just to go deeper and deeper into the playoffs. He's not gonna win you a playoff game, obviously. Like, or he's not a playoff game, sorry, but like he's not gonna win you a championship necessarily, like by himself.
But he can win you a game or two.
But yeah, he can clutch up a game or two for you, which would be pretty nice.
Yeah, and another thing that scares me about the Browns in the future, they did just pick up 2 tackles in the draft and in free agency.
Yeah.
Conklin and Jedrick Willis.
Yep, Jedrick Willis.
Both I feel like are top tackles, one being in the draft and one being in the NFL. They're starting to build an offensive line that is scary. And if they were able to pick up Jadeveon, that would be a scary defensive line. And who kind of fits that mold, who was in the Super Bowl last season? The 49ers. I do not want to play the 49ers twice every year.
Oh, my gosh.
That would be horrendous. And quite frankly, I would not be able to stand Baker Mayfield just being a big old
jerk
the entire time. He would just be like,
does that thing where he hands the ball off and then sprints down the sideline with his freaking arms flailing.
His cockiness would get to me too much. Another thing too, we were talking about how important the coaching is and having Freddie Kitchens be more like a player's guy. He tried to be a player's guy, but there's examples in the AFC North of player guys working, like Mike Tomlin. And even though he kind of had a catastrophe with Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, it wasn't necessarily his fault. It was more of just they wouldn't pay those guys. And Antonio Brown, we all understand
He's self-destructed.
he's self-destructed. And, everyone on that team loves and adores Mike Tomlin. Only good reviews with him. And John Harbaugh is another really good coach that we just don't really talk about a lot. He's kind of a mixture between the two as well. He's a good coach, but he's also a player's guy. He seems to be really connected with those guys. He knows exactly what to say to them to get them fired up. And that's kind of like a Harbaugh thing, to be honest.
Yeah, that's why I like Harbaugh as a coach, at least, is he really will get on to you. Like, if you're messing something up, like, you'll have some coaches that are like beating around the bush and they don't necessarily want to be that guy that's like, look, we got to get this going. But Harbaugh, you've seen him on the sidelines just losing his mind. Like,
Yeah.
we got to get this going right now. If we don't, we're gonna kind of thing. So that's me personally playing football for like a lot of my life. I like those coaches like that can just ignite a fire, because there's sometimes when you're with players and things. This is kind of a big focus when I was playing up at Tiffin in college. They would be like, well, you can have players like you'd have an offensive lineman, say you see a running back or a receiver kind of messing up a little bit, you can say something to him, but they're going to just disregard you because they're like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's obviously not my position, he can't see what I'm doing kind of thing. But like when it's either a player in that group, like a wide receiver group, if another wide receiver comes to you and is like, look, you got to get this going, or a coach that really like pays attention to what you're doing, even like a wide receivers coach or a head coach or offensive coordinator, whatever. And when they come up to you and they're like, look, this is what you need to do, this is what we need to get rolling, and you need to focus on this and not be, say, dropping passes or goofing off kind of thing, that really gets the players together and starts getting them a fire under them and get them rolling down the track better.
Yeah. And that, I guess, kind of segues into the Steelers now, with
The
Mike Tomlin
Pittsburgh
and
Squealers.
Pittsburgh. This team is another one of those teams where I just feel like they are underappreciated, and they're also underdogs in a way, especially with Big Ben getting hurt week 1. This team could easily do some damage,
Real
just
quick,
like they always have.
did you see his face and all that? How he
Yes,
had?
I did.
Oh my, what was that?
That's
dude?
exactly why I shaved. I didn't want to be like him.
You looking like
I
Big
was
Ben.
looking like Big Ben. I'm like,
Jeez.
no, that's not gonna happen. And let's be honest here, Big Ben changes this team. Mason
Oh, yeah,
Rudolph was
100%.
definitely not the answer. And
Duck?
Doug
The
Hodges,
Duck.
yeah, Duck, definitely not the answer there either. I don't necessarily see Big Ben throwing for 5,000 yards. It is an
No.
elbow injury, and I don't know if it's on his throwing arm or not.
For
But
sure.
either way, being out for a year can do different things, especially in year 19.
Yeah, some of that. See, my thing, this is kind of what I was wanting to talk about mainly was, so Big Ben is coming back. There was a lot of talk of him last year about like retiring and this, that, and the other. And he's like, I'm not going to retire off an injury. Like, he's like, I don't want to go out like that kind of thing. But my question is, like you were kind of saying, when you come back from like an elbow injury like that, even if it's on your non-throwing hand, any motion you do, like I had an MCL tear and I got like that surgically repaired. And even after that, it's never the same. Like it's never 100%. You're always going to be that little bit of fear to do something that you used to be able to do, just not even thinking about it.
Man.
So when Ben comes back, I'm kind of wondering, is it going to be like 100? Like obviously it's not going to be 100% because that's impossible. But when he throws, is he going to be like fluid with it, or is he going to be kind of favoring whatever arm that was? We didn't find out what arm that was, but
Yeah, I'll look it up right now.
he just, with that arm, if it's his throwing arm, is he going to follow through like he used to and kind of do all these other things? And one thing that kind of worries me about Ben, which is proven to not be a factor over the years when he's been playing, but he is the least mobile quarterback on the freaking planet.
Yeah, he uses his sturdiness
Yeah.
and a lot of his arm strength to stiff arm guys when he's being under pressure. And this happens to be his right elbow. This is his throwing arm.
Oh,
So I don't know if he's going to be throwing. I definitely don't see another 4,000 or 5,000 yard season. They're going to need to rely on the run. They're going to need to rely on that good offensive line. They still retained a lot of their players.
see, which is why I'm kind of interested that they got Chase Claypool, the wide receiver out of Notre Dame in the draft in the second round. So that kind of shows that they're going to try to focus a little more on getting Juju some help to where he can just go down the field and they can start spreading the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they do have some pretty decent tight ends. They got a lot of working pieces inside there. And obviously with Ben out, those pieces were kind of just pieces to a puzzle that were just laying around without the center of the puzzle, basically.
Yeah.
And I think Ben does that for him. He just kind of brings the team together. Obviously, he's a veteran. He's a leader. But again, like we were saying, I don't know how that arm's going to work out with trying to spread the ball out at all, or if they're just going to keep running the ball and then every once in a while just quick routes, or what they're going to try to do with that.
Back in the day when they still had Hines Ward, this is what I feel like they're starting to move towards, is more smash mouth football, including in the passing game. They're not trying to burn you anymore like with Antonio Brown. They're going to try to do slants, do ins, and try to, get the linebackers to get a little scared of these receivers. Chase Claypool is a pretty huge guy. Juju is a pretty decent-sized guy, too. You got Eric Ebron. They've got the other tight end.
And, my thing, even Juju, he's been in the league like a few years, but Juju's freaking young. Like, all these guys are, like, young. So, like, if you can find, obviously, Ben's not going to be here forever, but if you can find someone to be behind him, where we know Rudolph and freaking Duck are
definitely not the answer.
They're all right as quarterbacks, but they're not leaders. They're not like Mason Rudolph. We obviously saw when the whole Myles Garrett thing happened. A leader normally would just walk away from that and be like, "Look, I can't afford to be thrown out of this game," even though it was over already. A leader still looks at it and looks at the future and is like, "Oh, if I do this, I'll get thrown out this week, next week." Because when you get thrown out of a game, you're thrown out for the rest of that game and the week after that, usually. Most leaders, like, if that would have happened to Ben would have just got up. He would have been angry about it, but he wouldn't have started yelling and trying to fight anybody and all this, that, and the other, which kind of gets to, like, the offensive lineman. Like, those guys, I don't know if you know this, but every offensive lineman thinks of the quarterback as their little brother, as, like, a guy that if he gets even touched, oh, it's like the end of the world. Like, offensive line coaches will yell at you so long. Like, you'll have to run laps on Monday. Let's be honest. If you mess up Monday, Tuesday, whatever. When they came to his defense, it was like, okay, yeah, that I could see that. But with Ben, they wouldn't have had to. Ben would have just got up and been mad, and he probably would have yelled at his offensive lineman a little bit for letting him get back there. But then he just would have went to the sideline or gotten, like, I don't even remember the actual play itself.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers the play. They just remember the
Mason Rudolph, he threw a bit of a fit. And I don't think Big Ben, he would have probably, thrown his hands up like, what the heck are you doing? But Mason Rudolph, he tried to fight him.
Yeah.
And he got burnt pretty bad.
He got beat up a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. And, despite all that offensive question marks, especially with Big Ben, the defense is monstrous. It's just terrifying outright. Even with the loss of Hargrave, they are legitimate Super Bowl contending defense. If they continue to develop Devin Bush.
Yeah,
I remember Devin Bush, the one the Bengals were going to get, but then got swept under by the Steelers.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That hurts.
That hurts. Devin Bush is pretty good, and he was really good last year, but he still had a lot of room to improve and grow. If he ends up being anything like Shazier, if he's anything like close to Shazier, this team is nasty. And again, this is a team that I don't want to face twice a year. This makes me scared for Joe Burrow's life, which we're going to talk about here.
You see, my thing, when you think of, like, legitimate championship defenses, in my opinion, like, at least I feel like probably the casual fan of, like, football who just kind of watches and kind of understands a little bit, when you say the Steelers defense, the past 2 years, I wouldn't think of, like, oh yeah, they're a real good defense, but, like, they're, like, kind of a sleeper. I think, like, a sleeper defense where
a lot of it is overshadowed by how poor they did on offense.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm telling you, they were holding teams under 17 points most of the season.
So if you had them on, like, a fantasy football type thing, you'd be pretty glad you have them, but they're not, like, lighting, like, stats up wise, but, like, they're getting stops, keeping teams to under points, and, like, It's
Yeah,
just crazy.
they don't remind me of like the Buccaneers of '01 or
Yeah,
or that's the Ravens of '01. The Buccaneers are '02 or '03 or something like that. I
yeah,
can't quite
somewhere
remember.
around there. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't strike me as like one of those teams, but they're just overall like they're not Saxonville. They're not known. They're not the Legion of
Saxon.
Boom. But
Yeah,
this team, this defense is just really good, well rounded. Most of those guys will make plays for you. They will get those stops for you.
yeah. They got was that Minka Fitzpatrick
Yeah.
at safety? Yeah, and he legitimately, if you watch his play, like he makes some real good plays. Like he's not an absolute freaking burner. Like he's not gonna absolutely run from one side of the field and catch up to somebody in about 2 seconds. But he plays smart, so he knows where he needs to be, kind of where he needs to go on the field, and who he needs to help.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing with safety. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but um, I've obviously I'm a big guy, so I've never really played safety at all. But it's real important for your safety to know kind of where he needs help, like especially to know his guys, like his corners and
Yeah.
things, who's gonna get like burnt easier. Not that they're always gonna get burnt, but the guys who aren't as fast, so they can't keep up with faster guys, and you got to know who's gonna need help over the middle, who needs like help
Yeah.
over the sides. And
Safety in the NFL, they are the ones that position the nickels, the corners. They're saying you need to pick up this guy.
yep,
I need to cover deep or whatever. And you know, he's definitely a great first round pick because that's what they traded up or traded him for as a first round pick. So we're gonna just regard him as the first round pick.
yep.
It was a great pickup for them, and I think it was worth it. They might not have felt like that last year just because they went 8-8, but 8-8 last year, if they did that this year, would be the seventh round seed,
Playoff bound.
playoff bound.
Yes, sir.
And to be honest, if they ended up playing the second seed, which was the Chiefs, we might not see the Chiefs in the Super
We
Bowl.
might not have seen
That's
them
how
in the Super
good this
Bowl, dude.
defense is. It's literally that good. I don't know. They're just a team that is definitely going to be better this next season.
Mhm.
Just watch out for them. It's going to be lights out when they play the Ravens. I expect the same thing from the Browns because last season it was pretty much lights out, even though they weren't really playoff contending.
You
We'll
know,
see though.
not to backtrack too much, but real quick, I kind of wanted to the running backs that were taken in the AFC North, at least, because there was two or three, two, I think.
I know of one from the Ravens, JK.
J.K. Dobbins, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about, and then the Steelers got
The Memphis.
Anthony McFarland from Maryland.
Okay, yeah.
So especially with J.K. Dobbins, I was kind of surprised he went to them, and that he not really fell that low because it's not really like second round, like not really
You're not really
falling.
Yeah, for a
But
running back this day, yeah.
but I was kind of surprised that the running back out of Georgia went before him, and
Swift and
yeah.
Clyde's Edward Hilaire.
Yeah,
You know,
which is kind of surprising for me because I was like, obviously being in the Ohio area, more of a Ohio State fan, you see J.K. Dobbins, and the commentators that commentate over Ohio State games, it'd be J.K. all day, all the time, and that's all you would hear at Ohio State games. So it was kind of surprising because I did watch a little bit of the other guys, and I think J.K. Dobbins just has this little bit more of an it factor, like not necessarily that he's more athletic or more this, that, or the other. He just has this one it factor where it's kind of like with Le'Veon was, at least when he was playing for the Steelers, because we know with the Jets he's still good, but where's the rest of his team at, kind of thing. When he was with the Steelers, he had that offensive line where he could watch for a hole, like he had that pause. He could pause and then make a move right then. I think J.K. Dobbins is a little bit the same way with the it factor. Not necessarily that he can pause and go, but like he has a lot of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just it. Like he can do.
got a lot of tendencies to make guys miss.
Yeah. He can do certain things where it's just like you wouldn't think you couldn't just pick a guy off the street that's pretty fast that could just do that. Like he has that like thought process that like he's a pretty smart guy to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Also to mention the other guy, the Maryland guy, Farland, was that
Yep.
his name? Yeah.
Yep.
Um, he's a change of pace guy. So now that the Steelers officially have someone that can play third down back positional roles, with that change of pace, could really help out Big Ben being able to throw out into the flats. Sure, he's going to need that. He's not going to be able to really throw huge deep balls.
Yeah, I really think the running back combo that they're gonna have out there in Pittsburgh is really gonna help Big Ben just get back into the flow of stuff. I think when it gets later into the season, I think they're gonna try to probably throw a little more than they were in the early in the season because they're trying to just get him used to
Yeah.
throwing motions and everything again. But their running back coming out of the backfield and just running like even just angle routes over the middle or even having like Juju just a slant over the middle kind of thing. I think they're going to try to do a lot of that kind of stuff, and then some hitches, some stop and go kind of things, trying to get the ball out a little bit quicker to
Screens for sure.
yeah, to because obviously the Steelers' offensive line for years has been really good. Like has been a solid offensive line. Like they're not letting through 100 sacks a freaking year or anything crazy like that. So I think they're gonna do those quick stuff to get him his confidence back, and it's more of just his confidence in himself, to where he can like get rid of the ball, throw the ball, kind of thing. And they'll do their short routes, runs, and they can do, as you said, like change of pace kind of thing, run at a different way, come at things different from a different perspective. But then once it starts to get later into the season, I think especially with picking up um, Chase Claypool, like yeah, you say he's a bigger guy, but I really think he could probably be that opposite side from Juju, where you have that 1-2 kind of thing, where if they want to focus all their attention on Juju, then you just go out to Chase Claypool and just get him the ball. And if they're like, oh, well, Claypool is killing us now, they switch to that and kind of focus. Because there's not a lot of teams in the league. And this goes for like any level of football you play. If you have two really, really good receivers, there's not a lot of teams that have two really good corners that are like lockdown corners. Like you'll have a Richard Sherman, but on the other side, you'll have just a guy that plays pretty well and he can cover a two, basically. And I think that's kind of how even their defense kind of operates. Like they have guys that are like locked down on one, and then you got the guy that can pretty much guard a two. But then you have those safeties like Minka out there who can like shut stuff down. I think that's where the Steelers are gonna like have their game most of the season. Is they're gonna go short, short, and then once it gets to like say week 7, week 8, week 9 kind of area, they're gonna start trying to get the ball down the field a little more because I think Ben's gonna have his confidence back by then. Hopefully, he completely shaves his beard off by then because that's just atrocious.
Ugh, disgusting. Yeah, I agree. I think probably by next season, first 2 or 3 games, it's gonna be quick passes, a lot of smash mouth. It's kind of a little bit of the reverse of what usually teams do. They usually pass a lot in the beginning of the season, and then they start grounding and pounding when winter starts changing. Or
Yeah,
the
when the season starts changing
yeah,
and people are starting to get a little bit tired because it's later in the season. But I really think they're gonna kind of do that, but like have Juju run down the field because like your corners are gonna start getting wear and tear. Obviously, they're professionals, so they can get through it. But even the most in shape best guy you have by the end of the season isn't in mid season form. Like there's a reason they call it mid season form. You have that for like 4 or 5 games over the middle of the season. In the beginning of the season, you're not in shape. You're in shape, but you're not in football shape because there's a big difference. And then you get in midseason shape where you're like good and you're making things happen, and you're making things happen so much that you're getting hit, and that wears on your body. So by the end of the season, you're like, all right, I need to get back into um, just a shape to where I can be okay with not being hurt all the time. And then that's kind of why it was important to have the 1 and 2 have the bye week for the first two for the first playoff game for the wildcard weekend or whatever. Which is why I'm kind of concerned about the adding of another team. So you take away the two's bye week because the 1 and 2 team fight so hard to have 1 and 2, and like they play hard. They like obviously they're some of the best teams in the league.
man.
So the 1 and 2 have that extra week off to recuperate their like tired muscles, whatever bruises, fix all that up. And you can argue that kind of hurt the Ravens last year with that week off they had. It was kind of like they looked like they took the whole week off and just slept because I thought they could win no matter what in the playoffs. But I do think that week kind of gives teams a little bit of time to get prepared to be into the playoffs and playing at that mid-season level that they need to be come playoff time. Like that, be completely 100%, be able to go at everything, just everything all to the wall, just going kind of thing.
Yeah. Agreed. And speaking of the seventh seed spot, let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets interesting.
This is where things are going to get interesting because I think the Bengals, they don't have a chance of winning the AFC North. I will never say that. I don't think that their offense is good enough for that, especially with teams like the Steelers and the Ravens. Their defense just being kind of monstrous. And like we said before, once the Ravens get up, they just, go off and
you're in
go
trouble at
after
that
a
point.
quarterback all the time. Steelers are just going to suffocate you. But the Bengals have made almost all the right moves this offseason. And I can explain by just saying when they had the opportunity to pick up a linebacker, the Browns linebacker at that, they didn't overpay him. I think that was really, really smart. And instead, what they decided to do was find a eventual replacement for Geno Atkins because he's not getting any older or any younger.
He is, in fact, getting much older.
Yeah, he's getting much older, in fact. He's like 32, I believe.
Yep.
Which is crazy to think that both Carlos and Geno, two of the best defensive players on that team, are getting way older now. And it's kind of scary to think that we're heading to a place where if we don't start fixing things, we're going to be laughing stock for
we're gonna be the Browns for a few years.
Yeah. And the thing that gives me hope is Joe Burrow. He is more like Joe Daddy to me.
Oh my gosh.
This guy literally sweeps people off your feet. If you just watch the playoff games that he played in for college, you cannot tell me this guy is not the next coming
Trash
of Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes. He just puts it right on the money every time. I don't know how he does it. Don't know how someone can be this perfect at such a young age. But literally back shoulder throws every single time, right on the money. And I know it probably won't help that we don't have an off season for him to continue to develop and make those connections. But these receivers that we have, we might have the best receiving core in all football. We got T. Higgins, we got A.J. Green, we got Tyler Boyd, John Ross. Like, no one's going to be able to cover all four at once.
If John Ross actually decides to show up and play.
Of course, it all depends on if people are healthy. But you can't ever predict them not to be healthy. So the only thing that I have a question mark with is our linebackers, which we have 4 new linebackers after the draft, and all of them might not work out, but I know at least one of them will at least have starting potential. And we already have Jermaine Pratt.
Yep.
And as long as we keep developing that section of our team, I think everything else is pretty much set. We've redone our corner position. We've redone the safety. We've redone the defensive line. Next season is probably our season. Legit, we have a chance of going 7-9 and making it.
Real quick, with the linebacker situation, I'm actually really excited to watch Logan Wilson play because I saw him. I saw his highlights in Wyoming. Obviously, I didn't really watch a whole lot of games because other than people in Wyoming who really watches Wyoming games. But I saw him do some things that I'm like, if he can do that while playing with the Bengals, I think he can really have potential to be that next guy who kind of runs the defense, kind of not necessarily running the defense, being like a veteran, but being that core guy that they need to kind of command the middle of the defense to stop runs and stop things like Lamar Jackson doing that pirouette crap that he did on us last year that we got absolutely smoked on. That was everywhere for like a month that we had to sit and watch.
And I'm not going to lie, last season, only keeping 1 or 2 linebackers on our team, I have no idea what that's all about.
Yeah,
I understand the philosophy of you only keep your best players, but man, that was a huge mistake, especially when it came to playing Lamar Jackson. We could not stop him whatsoever.
You see, you can keep your best players, but there's only one problem with that. If your best, say, like 11 players, if 8 of those best players you have are D linemen, Defensive linemen can't stop tight ends going over the middle. Defensive linemen can't stop receivers coming over the middle. Like, that's not their job. Yeah, you have some formations in some plays where your defensive end maybe will drop back because he's like right outside the linebacker, kind of edge rusher guy. Sometimes they can drop back, but at the end of the day, if you have those guys that are like core defensive linemen, like the front three, defensive linemen, if you have those core front three, they, yeah, you can switch them out and like you can rotate, keep guys fresh, which is a good thing which the Bengals used to do when we had a good defensive setup, when we would just rotate guys, and that's when our defense was really good, when we just keep guys fresh, rotate. But there's only a certain number of guys you can actually play, because at the end of the day, if you only have, say, Carlos or Gino in for say 7-8 plays in the first quarter, and then 4 plays in the second quarter, and then you try to play them a little more in the second half because the other guys were getting more reps and they're kind of tired. There's still only a certain amount of guys you can still play, even if those guys get like little reps, like four reps or whatever in a quarter, which is not likely to happen because you got to keep rotating them. But a rotation is really good, but you have to kind of limit that rotation to, say, 2 or 3 team core guys on your D line. So when you only have like 2 linebackers that you keep, if either of those guys don't work out the way you want them to, or one of them gets hurt, then you're kind of scrambling, going back to the drawing board, saying, "Hey, what can we do? Who are we gonna have to pick up? We need to look on the free agency list, see who's there."
You get a Sean Williams playing linebacker, and we
Exactly.
see how well that went last season. It was not good. And I know he actually did play safety, but more than 50% of his snaps were in the box.
Yeah,
he basically
was a blitzing
played
safety. He was a blitzing safety. 100%.
Yeah. And the good thing is, not only do I like the Logan Wilson linebacker pick, I like Akeem Davis-Gaither, and I like Marcus Bailey too. All 3 of those guys, I think, have real potential to start one way or another. I think they can all 3 of them, make impacts right away. I'm most excited to see what they do with ADG. That's Akeem Davis-Gaither.
Yep.
And I think what they're trying to move forward with is changing our defensive scheme. And there's a lot of rumors saying that we're going to go to a 3-4 defense, which that would be wonderful if we did.
Hallelujah, we have a middle linebacker.
We actually have a middle linebackers now. And I can't imagine, like, just to put this in perspective so people at home understand. So we have Geno Atkins and DJ Reader. Both of them garner double team worth protection.
Yeah, double team protection, yeah.
We have Carlos Dunlap and Carl Lawson. Both of them are more like, they're going to go after the quarterback. They're going to get to him. I know Carlos Dunlap did really well in the run game, but can you imagine him fresh, always running at the quarterback? Akeem Davis-Gaither and Sam Hubbard, both of those guys can play on the edge too, as the off linebacker roles.
We already know that Sam Hubbard is dangerous. Like, he can go in and do exactly what you need him to.
Yeah, and then on top of that, Marcus Bailey and Logan Wilson are both middle linebacker prototypical players.
Mm-hmm.
We've just totally revamped our defense. If you switch to a 3-4, I cannot see us ever giving up more than 6 yards on a run game, on a run play. With DJ Reader and Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, Sam Hubbard, Carl Lawson, ADG, Marcus Bailey, and Logan Wilson all going after it. I mean, and plus we've got the other safety that we just picked up, Von Bell.
Yeah.
And Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander, they're going to be playing outside corner and that nickel corner. Those guys are really good in the run defense too. Like, we literally we saw what happened when we played Lamar Jackson. We're like, never again. We went for guys that could stop the run, and we also went after versatile linebackers that could cover on pass plays. And I believe, honestly, that we could be a dark horse top 10 defensive team. These players all together, if they end up being really talented, like Marcus Bailey doesn't get hurt because he's a second round talent,
Yep.
if ADG doesn't get hurt because he was more like a second, third round talent as well, and Logan Wilson, if he takes that leadership role and commands the middle of this team, we haven't had that since like early 2014 Vontez. Vontez has been in and out of the lineup. You know, he was good, and he was great for us in the playoff game, by the way. Fun fact. He did not lose us that playoff game.
When he destroyed people and then decided to argue with people and got us forever penalties, you know.
Not his fault. But anyways.
Not his fault at all. Not his fault at all. No, never.
It wasn't. Anyways, this team is really good. I'm telling you, you're gonna be surprised. Any of the viewers out there watching, you will be surprised when this team plays well on defense.
You know, one thing I kind of want to get at real quick. It's kind of underrated with DJ Reader and those guys in the middle. It's really underrated needing to double team people. A lot of people, you don't really think about that. Like I'd just say as a casual fan, just watching football, you never really like pay a lot of attention. When you have to double team guys, especially if you have to double team more than one, that leaves a linebacker wide open for a play. That means they're gonna have to double off the linebacker, which means they both start on the D lineman there, on say the D tackle or the nose guard. They'll be both on him, and then they have to push him back far enough to get to the secondary, and then break off onto that guy in the secondary, which is going to be your linebackers or say blitzing safety or whatever you want to have, whatever you have you. So if Logan Wilson or ADG, either of those guys, because I know that Marcus Bailey has the potential to be really good, but since he was 7th round, I'm just going to leave him.
Yeah. Injury history too, so that's fair.
So I'm going to leave him out for right now. But if either of those guys or anybody that we have in the secondary from pickups during the offseason, if any of those guys, they'll come free now, because if our D linemen garner those double teams, when you get those double teams, and it's kind of underrated where offensive linemen, it's really actually a lot harder than you think it would be to get off a double team and go to the linebackers, because the linebackers are always watching what's happening in the backfield. They're watching play flow, where stuff's going. They're watching offensive linemen's feet, because offensive linemen got to reach a certain way to get to a guy to make sure they have the edge on him. If, say, they're running a pitch to the outside to the left, offensive linemen will start by going to the left and kind of stepping that way and kind of trying to block people off from there. So if you get that double team and the linebackers can read that, especially if you have really good reading linebackers, they can shut down a run game easy. If you have to double team a couple guys on the front, because breaking off that double team to get to a faster linebacker, a guy who can actually move and then make plays, it's not as easy as it sounds. Of course, it sounds like just go and do it, but it's really not.
And not to mention that both DJ Reader and Geno Atkins have multiple times broken through double teams. So can you imagine both of them on the line at the same time?
Yeah, they'll go out there, kill double teams, and regardless, even if they miss the double team and they get to the safety or to the linebackers, that's going to leave Geno or DJ Reader just a free shot at whoever's running the ball, whoever has the ball. And then if they don't break those, it is really an underrated part of the game, forcing a double team. Because when you force a double team, you just ruin schemes, because you'll have schemes where a guy's supposed to just automatically miss the D tackle. Like you'll have a nose tackle and your guard and your center are supposed to double him. If that guy in the middle doesn't need a double team, your left guard can just go straight up to a linebacker, and that shuts your linebacker off, which then leaves the hole wide open for people like Le'Veon Bell who are going to watch the bowl, or running backs, like any of the running backs in the league, like Saquon, or any of those guys, even the Ravens game, which is kind of I'd say more of like a kind of not really option, but like option football gets hard when you have to double people kind of thing. So you'll start to run the option. Say Lamar goes back and tries to read the end, but then you have a guy coming straight at you from the middle needing the double team, and then those linebackers have time to read, and they can get over there to stop Lamar if he goes over there. And especially with Logan Wilson, like I know he can make tackles in open field. Like he's not the absolute craziest tackler in open field, but he can make those plays. Like he's going to make a lot of those plays.
Yeah.
So,
and going back to the double team thing, the thing is with Geno Atkins, him being older, and with him being older, and DJ Reader going to be his eventual replacement, that gives us the option to start rotating guys in and out again.
Yeah, like how we did
And
when we were good. Yeah.
and that gives us the option to stack the zero techniques on either side and just blow up the front of the offensive line. It, this is going to be what should have been when Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald got together.
Yeah.
This will be what it should have been. And people, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be fun to watch them. They're going to create a lot of turnovers, and it's going to be fun to watch this defense. Now, the offensive side, the only concern that we have is this offensive line, which a lot of people are saying.
My massive point.
A lot of people are saying, oh, Jonah Williams is coming back. Oh, but we've never seen him play a single offensive snap. He might have been the best offensive tackle last season, but offensive tackle in the NFL nowadays is one of the riskiest positions to draft. It's one of the most biggest busts in NFL right now. So we have no idea how good John Williams is.
And see, that's kind of where I come at when I say that I don't know about Joe Burrow. It's not his physical abilities. It's not his brain. Like I know he himself can perform. It's not him that I'm worried about. It's that offensive line. Like you said, Jonah Williams coming back. When you have tackles, look, your tackles are the guys who have to block guys like J.J. Watt, T.J. Watt, Clowney, like those outside rushers who are just fast. And they got to have a brain about them to be able to set fast enough, just kick back fast enough to keep those guys from getting to your quarterback. And when you have that, plus your inside guys with all the problems we've had inside, we've shored it up, which I'm starting to get a little more okay with what we're doing. But with what we had going last year, our inside guys just gave up pressure. And even if you wouldn't really think about it all that much if you're just watching a game, but even with your nose or your center getting pushed back by the nose, even if he's not getting to the quarterback, when he starts to get that guy close and closer and closer, your quarterback starts to panic a little bit. He's like, oh, I'm going to have to get rid of this. I know what's coming. I know I'm going to have to get rid of this.
To kind of stem off of that, Joe Burrow, he's good and he can run outside the pocket, but that's going to be the problem. He's going to want to run around a lot, and he's not going to want to set his feet, and that's when you're the least accurate. Now, he kind of broke the laws of football by being able to throw perfect on the run, but we don't know how bad this line will be. If it's anything like it was last season, I don't expect him to be all sunshine and rainbows. You know, he's going to have growing pains too. So this team could easily go 7-9 with their schedule.
Yeah.
But that would give them legitimacy in making the playoffs then.
See, I have a real problem. So, yeah, we know Joe Burrow can throw and run and all that. But again, the guys he was playing against while in college, we've argued this point many times, but they're just not that same level as like T.J. Watt when he first came in. Yeah, he was really good, and it was just like raw talent basically. He came in raw talent. They coached him up for a little while, and now he's scary, and that's kind of how I feel. It's like Joe Burrow is going to come in, and my main problem is I know 3-4 years down the road, if we protect him, Joe Burrow could be lights out. He could be that Patrick Mahomes. He could be that Aaron Rodgers. He could be absolutely insane. But the problem is, if we don't protect him for the first couple of years, it's going to start getting to him. It's going to hit his conscience, hit his psyche, whatever.
We'll have an Andrew Luck all over again.
Yeah, exactly. So then if he starts getting hit, starts getting hurt, not like sitting out hurt, but like those bruises, those bumps that really kind of hurt, you'll have in 3 or 4 years, you'll have a guy who's just scared. He's in the backfield. Even if after that you shore up the line, say 4 years down the line, you shore up the line, it's going to take a little while after that for him to get into his head that, oh, I have time. I can actually sit back and take a 5-step drop and throw and things like that. Whereas like with Andy Dalton last year, I know you're going to disagree with me, but Andy Dalton, he's not going to win you. Like, he himself, by himself, is not going to win you championships. But he could legitimately play. But you had to where, and especially, it was really evident last season when they started taking him out and started rotating in what we call noodle arm.
Good old noodle arm Finley.
Yeah, so it was real apparent and then they brought him back in, and of course it was against some lackluster teams where they got the wins with the Dolphins, or not the Dolphins, the Browns, and like
The
games
Jets,
games like that where it was like lackluster teams. But when he came back in, he actually started playing a little better. I think a lot of it was because he knew he was going to leave, and he knew he wasn't going to be in Cincinnati. He needed to just shop himself around a little bit, if you know what I mean. But like Andy, like if he would have had, so a lot of the time he'd take a 3-step drop and then he'd know he'd have to get rid of the ball. And the problem with that, especially with AJ being out all last season, is that AJ was the only guy who you could confidently throw it to after that 3-step drop, and you could just launch it up to him, and you're like, okay, AJ 98% of the time is going to come down with a lot of those. But when you have Tyler Boyd out running the one routes, and that's another thing that kind of gets to it, is you get used to, as a quarterback, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm a big guy. I haven't played quarterback. I haven't played receiver. But when you have a certain receiver quarterback combo, you get used to that, and you get into the flow of things. And say like Big Ben with Antonio Brown, like they knew what each other's tendencies were. They knew what they could do. When you all of a sudden take Antonio Brown out and then just push Juju into that role, it's going to take a little while. There's going to be growing pains and everything else. And if you stack that with an offensive line that can't really protect all that well and all that, then you have Tyler Boyd out here who's trying to make those plays that AJ was, and he just can't, because one, he doesn't have the time to make some of those plays, because AJ is
a freak.
Yeah, he's an athletic freak. Like, I don't know how he does some of the stuff he does. But you'll have Tyler Boyd out here who's in his own right a really good receiver, but I just don't think he's that number one guy, at least for the Bengals. Like, I think he could be a number one receiver somewhere else. But and even with Andy leaving, I think he could even try to be a number one in Cincinnati. But the thing is, he has to get that kind of flow going with the quarterback so that they know what he's going to do. They know what his tendencies are, how he's going to kind of play.
He reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Sanders, and he played mostly like slot, and he was the number 2 guy, but he was extremely good. But as soon as he had to go into that number 1 role, you just see a decline in production. And it's mostly because you're being lined up outside, and, you know, the defense only has to key you, and they stop you, and the offense is done.
And that's where I think the Bengals have a little bit of an advantage, is especially if AJ can come back next year all healthy. And that's another topic, is freaking AJ last year saying he was going to come back. I don't really blame him for not coming back, because, like, if you're not 100%, why would you come back to a team that has no chance of winning anything? But with Auden Tate even out there, like Auden Tate, we saw glimpses last year where he would make like great plays. He'd make a diving catch or a stretching catch, and then we'd see sometimes when you're like, was he really putting in full effort there? Was he really trying there? And it's kind of like the same way with John Ross. John Ross, a lot of his problems, I think, are more of effort plays, where he'll have the ball, and of course we know about his inability to hold on the ball because he's got baby hands or something. I don't know what's going on there, but he'll go for a pass, and he'll have the ball. He could go up for it, and then you see it just kind of sail a little bit, and then it gets picked. And then he doesn't necessarily try his hardest to make that tackle, which I'm like, I guess you don't really want to hurt yourself all that much, because we know you have an injury history, and you're kind of like in the back of your mind, do I want to go after that? But it's still, I think with our receivers, we have a really good chance of being good. But like I've been saying forever, if that offensive line can perform, I think we could have been pretty decent last year if our offensive line would have performed. Because even with Auden Tate and all those guys, we still had good receivers like Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, John Ross when he kind of played a little bit. And we all know that Joe Mixon, in my opinion, Joe Mixon is like one of the top 5 running backs in the league right now. Easily. I think we're like, if our offensive line holds up, we could have one of the most dynamic offenses on the planet, where we can just do literally anything. But that's the problem, is what you got to kind of wonder about is if the offensive linemen that they picked up, that they kind of shored up the line with, are those guys more of like passing linemen, or are they running, or are they kind of a mix of both? Like they can do both pretty well. If they can do, I think if they can just block, like run block very well, that we could have one of the best offensive or like offenses period, because Joe Mixon is just that guy. Like he is hard nosed, all out every play, doing what he's got to do. And you know that by when he like gets the first downs, he stands up, starts being like, yeah, first down. Like y'all can't handle this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
if we can get that going, like we saw it at the end of the season last year. Our offensive line started doing a little bit better, and you started seeing Joe Mixon getting up there in numbers, getting up there like 100 yards, 100 yards, 100 yards kind of games. And if we can have those early in the season into midseason, that's going to shore it up to where, and another underrated kind of part of the game, when you can run the ball like that, your receivers start to get open. They just start to get open because you'll have linebackers who are playing more heavy into the run, and you'll have corners who are like not necessarily playing into the run, but kind of like shading inside to where they're like, okay, I got to watch for the run outside, watch for runs inside, kind of get to where I need. And then your safeties are going to be pulled down more where they're going to be like, okay, I got to play. And then all of a sudden you throw a bomb to AJ with Joe Burrow throwing a bomb to AJ down the field. AJ's going to be wide open because guys are trying to like play him a little more in. And all of a sudden AJ just burns him. And like John Ross, if John Ross can stay healthy and stop dropping the ball with, like, dude needs to stop eating popcorn before the game or whatever he's got going. He needs to stop all that. But if you can get him just burning guys on the field, and that's kind of what we originally drafted him for, John Ross, is to just burn people, because we all saw his freaking combine speed where he was just blazing down the field.
Yeah, we saw what Tyreek Hill could do, and we're like, ooh.
Yeah, we're like, ooh, we need that. So if we can get John Ross healthy, even if we don't pass him the ball as much, like just knowing in the back of the mind of the defensive guys, yeah, he'll create space. He just goes. Like even if we just sprint him down the field, that's gonna create space for Auden Tate and T Higgins, which we haven't really talked a whole lot about. Which I'm pretty excited for T Higgins. Like we got a little bit of sleeper there. I think
Yeah,
a lot of people kind of underestimated him. So if we have Higgins out there, we have Boyd, we have AJ, we have Auden Tate, we have John Ross. Like that's 5 receivers who, minus injury, legitimately could be number ones. Like John Ross is kind of the most iffy there, but like all those guys are like legitimate. If they played for 5 separate teams, they could be number 1 receivers. So I think our offense has the opportunity. I just really, I know that Joe Burrow can throw on the run and that he can do this, that, and the other, but
we just need to see what type of level that he can perform at.
Yeah.
During the preseason. If he can't, then it's going to be a long season. It's going to be a hard season to watch because I know he's good. That's the problem, is that we all know that he's good, but the team will fail him if so. It won't be his fault. And another thing to talk about, and we haven't talked about it all yet, it's the coaching and how important coaching is.
You trying to make me angry.
Oh, I'm trying to make you angry because how can you go nickel formation all season long? How can you run a 5-2?
You can see, my thing is you can do that kind of stuff, but you can't just solely do that. Like you have to sprinkle in some other things. And even from the outset of the season, even though Zach Taylor didn't just come out like at a press conference and be like, we're going to run a nickel defense all the time and nothing else, he kind of did that. Like after the 3rd week, people were like, we got, okay, so week 1 against Seattle, you did pretty good. You knew what you were doing. Week 2, they absolutely torch you. Week 3, they come out and torch you again, running that same defense. So teams are like, well, we can just go off of what they did week 2 and week 3, and we can beat the Bengals. Like that's an easy win on the schedule. And I think one of Zach Taylor's main problems, and I hope he can kind of start to fix this, is that he is obviously a kind of a one-dimensional kind of guy. And I think that comes with being like a young coach. You don't necessarily know like exactly how to switch it up. And that kind of falls to your coordinators then to kind of get with the coach and be like, look, we can't necessarily do this every time.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem, is that he's play calling on offense, which is, I want to still give him time because he still deserves some time. But from what I saw last season, he's not making very many changes at halftime. So reminiscent of Marvin. But the worst part is the initial game plans are even worse than Marvin Lewis's game plans.
Yeah,
I
and
don't know how that's
how
even possible.
how does that happen?
I don't understand how that's possible. And there were some games where it just looked like, like with the Jets, with the Browns, like they had something going. And, during the Seahawks game, he didn't try to force anything. I'd love to see that more. He just wasn't doing it though, like throughout the season. He wasn't shifting to the games
Yeah.
where the game was going. Like I saw it from the Seahawks game and I thought, oh wow, we've got a guy who just doesn't care if the defense is gonna give him this. He's gonna just keep doing this to him.
See, that's what I kind of I kind of want to be in like Zach Taylor's head for that, because with week 1, we watched it, and I want to know if he didn't necessarily do as much of the play calling, or if he didn't do as much as something else. And then when they lost, he was like, "Okay, I see what kind of how we need to go. I want to be that guy that makes those calls." But like week 1, we were molding to what we needed to do, kind of changing it up a little bit, changing this, changing that. And then once we hit week 2, we were like, "Okay, we just had a bad game." We were like, well, we just had a bad game. That was kind of a fluke type thing. We saw how we did last week. We're okay at 0-2. We're fine." But then you get to the third week and you realize we're doing the same thing we did week 2 when we got stomped. It's like, so you get stomped in then week 3, and then you go to week 4, and again we're still doing the same thing. You're like, where's the week 1 guy we had where we were just changing things up, kind of tweaking things,
going to the flow of the game.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to absolutely just completely steamroll at halftime your game plan. You just need to like make little tweaks here, little tweaks there, and kind of that's what you have the guys up in the booth for. They watch the game, they watch everything that's going on, especially when it's like offense to defense, like you're on offense and your guys are watching the defense. That's their main job, is to watch that defense, kind of see where the defense is playing to, see what their tendencies more are of this game, because you can watch all the film you want, but tendencies do tweak game to game. Like when you're playing, say you're playing a game, a team who likes to just bomb the ball deep. Of course, your guys are going to play off more. They see that, they're going to play off more. But
And speaking of that week 1 game, just throw that out there. Definitely wasn't a fumble. That was an incomplete pass. The very end of the game.
Bro, as Bengal fans, I feel like we get screwed on.
We
on
get so
the
screwed on some
rest
calls.
hate us. But people are gonna say, "Oh, well, you guys are just fans, so you're more biased." I don't know. I've seen some calls for the Steelers that I don't know about that. And that's not even just playing against Bengals. That's playing against like other teams, and I'm like, all right. I don't know about that, refs, but
yeah. And see, the thing is about the coaching, I feel like you can't really judge a lot off of year 1. You judge a lot of year 2 because they've had time to install their playbook. They've got guys that know what the playbook is now. We don't have necessarily the talent up front to make individual plays, because I think in the beginning we were doing a lot of zone running concepts, and Seahawks just stuffed us every single play. And a lot of it is because we weren't making the individual plays on the line. A lot of it is just like one-on-one. You got to get your guy, square up on him. And also the whole reason why we were kind of in that game to begin with was because of how stubborn the Seahawks defense was. They would not get out of their base 4-3 defense, so we could just throw on them all day. They weren't respecting John Ross either. So we just kind of were like, hey, NFL, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use John Ross if you don't, cover him well.
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to see more malleable play calls. I want to see more adjustments at halftime. I saw a lot of it during the first game, and it just continued to get worse and worse throughout the season until about week 14, week 15. When they played the Jets, I thought, they've changed up their offense somehow. They started to think, let's change the actual scheme of this team so then we can get Joe Mixon going. And they realized, oh, hey, we get Joe Mixon rolling, we're going to be pretty good.
He's a legit running back.
He's a legit running back. And I think that's going to be key for this season. We have to get him moving, and we got to, even though we have this amazing receiving core, we got to limit the amount of times we're throwing 30 times a game. We got to get Joe Mixon 20-plus carries. We got to be able to push on the offensive line so we can do more play action, get Joe Burrow running outside the pocket, for play action. Use that ability to throw on the run, and we'll be okay. Quickly, as we close out this podcast, tell me what you think of each 4 teams' records. What do you think they're going to be next season?
See, I think the Ravens, obviously, I think they're going to win. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But I really think teams are going to kind of start to shut them down a little bit because they're going to realize if you just stop Lamar, stop him from running. Not that is his only part of the game because everyone wants to say he's just a running back. He can actually throw the ball. If you start to get him out of his comfort zone, I think that teams could legitimately shut them down. I think the Bengals, it all just depends on their offensive line. Yeah, I think they have every chance at going 8-8 or 9-7. I really think they could. I really think they could be up there like that. But it just depends on that offensive line because I think our defense is short up now. They're fine. Their defense is leaps and bounds above what it was last year. We don't have
above average.
Yeah, we don't have those guys that are lagging behind that, like our number 1 corner last year. We all know how our corners went last year, and how the Bengals corners went. They just weren't good. They did this, they did that. Guys got hurt. We had to switch other guys in, and it was kind of like plug and play. Like whoever was there is what we put in. So again, it all depends on their offensive line. I think they have every chance of going 9-7. I've looked at their schedule. I think they can go 9-7, 8-8, and we all know now that makes the playoffs with that extra team in.
Yeah, I personally see them going 7-9, 8-8. I want to give them a winning record, but I have to see more from coaching, and I have to see how well Joe Burrow does with that offensive line first. I know we've got the talent on defense to win us games. I know we've got the talent, at least on the skill position on offense, to win games. You just got to see them all gel together. Now, you mentioned the Ravens first. I think the Ravens will probably go 12-4 next season, 11-5.
Yeah, close to that. Yeah.
I don't think they'll be as dominant. I am a big believer, and I feel like when a team loses bad in the playoffs, and you can just watch any team that loses bad in the playoffs, they don't do good the next season. But this team is good enough to win that many games outright, even with that bad luck. So I see them going 12-4.
Yeah, you've always been that bad juju guy.
I just believe in the bad juju. I don't know what it is.
Next season is shutting down.
Like you can look at the Falcons in the Super Bowl loss. You can look at the
Rams.
You can look at the Panthers. You can look at just any of the last 10 teams except for the Patriots, because the Patriots are a whole different animal altogether.
They do what they want to.
And the teams that lost in the Super Bowl or lost really bad in the playoffs usually don't do well.
To be fair, even though the Patriots lost, they kind of flipped that on its head. The Eagles weren't great after that. They had that Super Bowl, and then they just didn't go anywhere after that.
Yeah, part of that is just, that was all right timing, and they had there's 2 things: momentum and bad juju. And if you have really good momentum and then you end it with bad juju, they might counterbalance it. I don't know. We'll see. But
I think all this bad juju is a bunch of nonsense.
It might be a bunch of nonsense, but that's just my belief. It's just my belief, my sports belief.
Your sports beliefs on that one.
Yeah. And then we have the Browns and the Steelers. So we went 7-9 for the Bengals, 12-4 for the Ravens. And
so my thing, again, for the Browns, it's all going to consist on if they can gel together. Because last season, we all know if you're around any Browns fan at all, they were like, we're heading to the Super Bowl. We're heading to the Super Bowl. We have no other option but to go to the Super Bowl. And then you kind of saw how it played out. And a lot of them, see, my problem with a lot of Browns fans, not all of them, so don't flame me in the comments here, but a lot of Browns fans, they're like, well, it's this one person's fault. It's this one person's fault. They want to kind of find a singularity. And I think that's just kind of like human nature a little bit. You want to find a single reason for why something isn't going right. Because in our minds, it's too complex to say this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, or the whole offense in general, the whole defense in general, or our special teams is letting us down a lot. So they want to be like, oh, it's Freddie Kitchens' fault. It's Freddie Kitchens' fault. And before that, we all know their quarterback woes, how they're like, oh, it's the quarterback's fault. It's the quarterback's fault. When some of those guys, Yeah, some of them didn't pan out, but like Sam Bradford coming out of college, like Sam Bradford was freaking lights out. And then they get Sam Bradford in there, and he's not really anything. And is that their offensive line? I don't know. Wasn't avidly watching the Browns play. I saw them when they played the Bengals, of course, because we're Bengals fans. We watched them play, and you can see kind of where things are going wrong. But back to the record. I mean, I think they have every chance of being just positive, like 9-7 ish, or or even just 500. I think they have the potential. If you're just looking at potential alone, they have potential to be like legitimate contenders with the Ravens. If you're looking at just what they have, what they're going with, they have that chance. But I just think it's you got to get guys gelling. If they could get guys working together, moving together, kind of cogs in a machine type thing. If they can all get rotating at the same speed, kind of get going, they have legitimate chances to be like deep playoff runners. But again, you have to get that, or you're just not going to have anything. You could bring in the best players of all time. You could bring in, say, Randy Moss with Julio Jones, with like Tom Brady
Some
or
Madden
Joe
Ultimate Team
Montana.
here.
Yeah, some Madden Ultimate Team type stuff. But if their personalities can't work together, or they can't put their differences aside, or their egos aside to just be good as a team, again, like I said earlier, with the Patriots, a lot of those guys, it's a little known fact, some people might know, a lot of those guys take pay cuts every year. They took pay cuts every year so they could stay on a team and that team could stay great. And they all put their egos aside so that they could. The kind of only ego in the room was Bill Belichick. Like he was the only guy who was allowed to be like that guy. And even Bill Belichick, we all know he's just the most somber dude on the planet. Like he's even if at his draft day, if you guys watched the draft, he was at home, he was feeding his dog treats, and then he'd just walk off and be off camera for forever, and then he'd come back and he'd just be kind of dull and just so with yeah, like I said, they have all the potential in the world, but we'll see where that potential goes because like I said, the Browns fans last year were destination Super Bowl, and that
Yeah.
obviously didn't
I
happen.
I want to say with the Stefanski head coach that they're gonna go 9-7 or 10-6. Now the thing about this is, I think what is going to end up determining this is the Steelers because I think they'll go 9-7, 10-6 too. I think one of those teams is going to sweep one or the other,
Yeah.
depending on what happens with Big Ben, what happens with Baker Mayfield's development. I'm predicting Baker Mayfield takes another step forward. And I'm predicting Big Ben to maybe regress a little bit, become more of a game manager.
Mm-hmm.
But with this scenario, all four teams make it to the playoffs.
Yep.
And what's crazy is that, even with this happening, there is a chance that only one of these teams,
Yep.
and they could just all come crashing down. I think the only legitimate team that doesn't have a chance of crashing is the Ravens, just because of their team alone. But
that's what's kind of crazy with the extra team in the playoffs. So you do have that extra team, so everyone's like, oh, these teams that are 8-8 and like 9-7, kind of on the cusp kind of thing. It could still even happen. Like two teams in your division go 9-7, and neither of them make the playoffs because another one in another division won, say, 11 games. Like things like that can happen. But with the Steelers, I think they are the only team in the AFC North that legitimately have a chance of being bad, like bad, if you know what I'm saying. Because yeah, they have that defense, but that offense, you got to be like, they have a lot of pieces that their offense can make happen.
yeah, if
But
Big
it
Ben,
all relies on Big Ben and how he kind
if
of
he ends up
progresses.
being a dud, it'll be a rough season for them because they'll just be on the cusp of being like so good, but
Yeah,
just fall
it'll
flat.
be one of those things where you can see that they're a really good team. They're always in games, but they're gonna lose by 3 or lose by 6 or lose by 7 kind of thing. Where and that'll end up with a worse record, like a bad record kind of thing. You'll see the stretch where they go 0-4 or 0-5. Not necessarily at the beginning of the season going 0-4, 0-5, but like they'll have 3 wins and or week 6 they'll be like 3-3, and then they'll go on like a 5-game losing streak kind of thing or something like that.
Yeah.
So again, it just all relies on Ben's arm. I think they have a chance of being really good, but they also have the extreme chance. And I think the only chance in the whole division to be really bad. Because even if the Bengals don't perform the way they should, based on their pickups and kind of how they're rolling. I still don't think they lose, or I still don't think they win less than 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I think there's no way that
I
happens.
think the Steelers could have potential to tank for whoever. They actually have
tank for Lawrence.
tank for Lawrence, and if they did, I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't want to go through quarterback woes either. But are you willing to sacrifice a season? With all the bad stuff happening currently with Juju stuff. Maybe it is time for them to move on from Big Ben and his injury history, and who knows?
I really think they do need to start, like, not the Ben. Ben could still be a legitimate quarterback, because we all know Tom Brady's 3 trillion years old. No offense to anyone who's older than Tom Brady, but I really think that Tom Brady is kind of just a lone wolf. Like, he's special kind of thing. Whereas Big Ben, obviously we know Brady hasn't been hurt as much as Ben has, but Ben could come back and be really good for another couple of years. But they have to start looking at either college quarterbacks to replace, or like young.
If
like
last year wasn't an indication
guys
of it, then
yeah. And it's kind of the same way. Not to get off too much off topic towards the end here, but with like the Saints, they started looking for quarterbacks to kind of replace Drew Brees, because we know Drew Brees is getting up there. He got hurt last season. He did come back and he did have a really good season, but you start to look at it and see that these guys aren't superhumans and that they can't just last forever. Like, Tom Brady is crazy, but again, Tom Brady in the next couple of years, we'll have to see. He says he wants to play till like 50 or something like that, but I don't know how well that's going to work for him.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. But I think, do you have any other closing thoughts?
No, not really. I'm just really excited. I want the whole coronavirus and all the things going on with, like, politically and things like that. I want that to be done with, so we can get into some football and start just enjoying football again.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that concludes our podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Championship Formula. I'm Casey.
Thomas.
And we're out.
See you.